All right. So if we get into the plagues themselves, we have a situation here where God is attacking through the plagues. He's attacking what's trusted in Egypt. So how do you see that playing out here in the plagues that God gives? How is it that the things that are trusted in Egypt are being attacked?
Well, first we can start with the Nile here being turned into blood and the stinking, the fish dying, and almost all ancient cities were built on some sort of waterway, and the Nile was one of the best, especially the best in the region. And it's a source of life for them, but it's also like it was very important in their religious, in their religion, I guess, as a result as well. So God here is saying, this is something you heavily rely on, and that's the first thing I'm going to choose to judge.
So one of the things that you'll see throughout these is that, and many theologians have pointed this out, is that God is basically confronting and attacking the gods of the Egyptians in this. And it would make sense because, number one, he's proving that he is above all other gods to the Egyptians, because he's called on Egypt to let his people go to worship him. They need to come worship me, so you need to let them go. And they've said no. And he said, well, no's not the appropriate response here. And he's showing them why that's not the appropriate response. But he's also doing something for Israel, which is showing them that the allegiance that they have given over to these false gods of Egypt is misplaced, and it's causing them to be under tyranny. Really, that's what tyranny always results from. It results from worshiping the wrong gods. And the interesting thing is that that's still true today. Tyranny in your life is always the result of worshiping the wrong kind of gods, because things don't necessarily have to tyrannize you. You can think of, well, what if somebody's picking on me? Okay, is that tyrannizing you? If it is tyrannizing you, is that because maybe popularity is too important to you? Because there's no real reason why somebody picking on you should destroy your life. It can be an inconvenience. Right, but if they're burning down your house and everything, I mean, right, but that's not usually what people are talking about, right? Somebody at work's being mean to me. Okay, why is this destroying your life? Why is it so important that you be liked by everybody? You understand what I'm saying? Sure. Like there's very few times in our lives where we're actually in jeopardy of physical death, and so really, what most of the time the tyranny has to do with things that we value being threatened. And the problem is if you value the wrong thing, like if you're valuing so highly something that can be threatened so easily, then you see the problem, right? You're setting yourself up for tyranny. Right now inflation's a big deal, and there are people who are absolutely feeling threatened now because maybe some of the things that they've worked for, some of the wealth that they've trusted in is now being threatened. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so what we'll see throughout these plagues is that God is attacking the things that the Egyptians value, and he's attacking those things that they put their trust in. And those things are also their gods, because what else could they be? Yeah. People will say, well, the things I trust in aren't a god. Well, of course they are. If you trust in them, then they are a god. Yeah. That's the way that it works. So the first one is the Nile turning to blood. And as you said, back in the ancient world, you either put your city on the coast, on an ocean, or you put it on a river. And the reason that you did that was because obviously on a river you need water to drink, and rains are not the best source of water that you can count on. But also, it's really hard in the ancient world to get fat in your diet, which you absolutely need. And so it's a great source of that. Yeah. So economic success is tied to this river. And so the first god that is associated with the river in Egyptian lore is Hapi. And Hapi kind of means fullness of life. And fullness of life was from the river, right? Because, I mean, sure, you could live out in the desert like a nomad. That's in the Egyptian worldview, that's not fullness of life, right? What is fullness of life to an Egyptian? It's not having to do some of those things that other people have to do. The river brings in water for the crops. It brings in rich soil from the crops. It brings in fish. It brings in all this stuff so that we don't have to rely on the rains. We're not out in the desert trying to herd things, and it's an easy life for them. And one of the interesting things is that you can say that, well, they were simple people, and we're more modern, but do you think we are?
We're still trying to live and eat and survive.
And do as little as possible to accomplish it. Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is the funny thing. As I was looking at these, I was thinking, wow, we're not any different, really, because a full life, the fullness of life, living the good life, is that a small percentage of people in our day and age? Is that their God? Is it only a small percentage that worship that?
No.
I would say the majority.
Yeah, I would say, when you look around the world, people pretty much don't care what you do as long as you don't threaten their comfortable life.
Yeah.
And I would say that, as Americans, we're not much different than that. So the first thing that gets threatened is the comfortable life. Well, how else could it be in a plague, right?
Right.
The very first thing that gets threatened is having a comfortable life. So the second plague then is the plague of frogs. And Heket was the frog-headed god of the Egyptians, and it was a god of fruitfulness, which is interesting. It's kind of like having your endeavors be successful, And of course, who for a lot of people that's their god, right? They want to just be successful in whatever they do. That's all they're looking for. Now, do you see anything poetic about the way that God deals with this?
Well, I was thinking that God gives us what we want, and if we want a certain thing, here it comes. Yeah. And I think in the Bible it says there was no place the frogs couldn't be found. Yeah. And I was just thinking in my house, in every corner, just loaded with frogs. If I'm going to worship Heket, as you called it, here come the frogs. No thanks.
It reminds me of, when I was young, and the storied punishment for catching your kid smoking would be, well,
right.
Then you're going to smoke a case, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of God's version of the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're going to worship fruitfulness, if you're going to worship and the interesting thing is what he shows in a lot of these plagues is. So is God a God of fruitfulness? Is the God of the Bible a God of fruitfulness? Sure, but he's the God of everything else too, and fruitfulness therefore has its place in a hierarchy that isn't the same if you take out just fruitfulness and then worship that alone, right? And really, kind of what he shows in a lot of these is that when you remove some of a lot of these things are good things. But when you remove them out of a hierarchy that God institutes, then they're not good things at all. And again, it's kind of, in a similar way, it's kind of the same thing as the staff that becomes a snake. The thing that can be a blessing and that can be something that you are tempted to worship, if it's taken outside of the context of being put in its proper place, then it becomes something that's not life to you but death to you. And I think that's why, the staff can bud and blossom in one sense, but it can also turn to a serpent in another sense, right? If this thing that we value, if we allow God to put it in its proper place, it will blossom. It will blossom into being the best thing that it can be. But if we don't, then it's going to turn into something that can kill you, and sometimes literally kill you. So we have frogs, then we have gnats, and boy, that would be an annoying one, wouldn't it? One of the things that's happened over this summer of rains is that going out and doing the landscaping, doing the line trimming and stuff like that, dealing with the weeds, is that there's all these little gnats that get attracted to the weeds, and then when I go through to do that, they fly up, and then they're all around my face constantly. And I just can't imagine how annoying that would be to have that. There's no escape from that. There's nowhere you can go. There's no getting away from it. So the gnats deals with the god Geb, and it's the god of the earth. And it kind of represented comfort and peace. What I find interesting, it's kind of seems to be, as I study it a little bit, it seems to be kind of the hippie god, you know. It's the Earth Man, and just like chill, and you know. So what do you think's going on here with God's?
There's no peace
Plague.
with the bugs. I mean, as you describe it, I mean, one fly, right, bothers you. 10 flies, 1,000,000 flies, thousands and thousands, whatever. It just, there's no rest. There's no sense of peace and just rest at all.
Yeah. So, is there anything that you think, Chad, that the environmental movement or kind of the hippie movement gets wrong about nature?
I guess the big thing is that is nature above you or is it beneath you? And I think they think that it's above them.
Right.
But you know, obviously from a Christian perspective, it's beneath us.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that's really interesting is I don't think that you find that kind of hippie movement. Like in hippie lore, you always have this view of like in the ancient world, everybody was just like they were all hippies back then,
Yeah.
right? And then the
All
real
one with
reality
the
of the
world.
situation is back in the ancient world, nobody was a hippie. And the reason is because you can't really be a hippie. You can't really look at the world the way hippies look at it unless you have a comfortable modern life. Because in reality, the world is not something that brings you peace and comfort. The world is actually really difficult. The world brings you thorns and thistles and the sweat of your brow.
Right.
That's what, if you talk to a farmer, talk to people who actually live,
Yeah.
you know, trying to wrangle an existence off the land, and it's not all peace. The thing is that the world's full of swarms of insects that cover you, and you know what I'm saying. Like it's the world is full of sunburns and shivering and freezing to death, and you know what I'm
Open
saying.
sores, infection, pus,
Yeah.
destruction, death. I mean, the world is trying to kill you because it wants to live. I
Right.
mean, the snake,
Right.
when we went hunting, you said your eyes, you know, it's hard to see.
Yeah.
When that snake made its noise, then I heard,
Right.
and then finally got to see it. If I'd have kept walking,
Right.
you'd be taking me to the hospital.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't care if I'm...
Well, but even the choyas out there.
Yeah.
I almost said cholos. That's
The
different.
cholos. So many cholos out there.
but the choyas,
Oh, yeah.
everything that's out there is trying to hurt you. It's
Yeah.
it's just not. You have to pretend that the world is something that it isn't. And
The people that are like that do so because other people are in the way of them being attacked by the world.
yeah, so I think that God's kind of says, "Oh, the world's this peaceful, wonderful,
Yeah.
like respite." Huh? Well,
Yeah.
here, let me show you how that works.